All right, folks. We're going to start our report backs, but before we do, I needed to give a quick thank you to Lindenmeyer Paper for sponsoring the break we just had. Those fantastic cookies. Thank you, Marie. So thank you to Lindenmeyer. Okay, who wants to go first? Before I just start walking up to your table and, all right. Good job, Patrick. Well done. If it wasn't you, I was going to Joe, so.
All right. Well, a few of the problems that we covered is, having in-house talent to spearhead these type of AI efforts, right? Not everyone has the Christians of the world that, we can lean on for these issues. So also another thing was working in your existing footprint, right? So, our buildings, our facilities, our pathways are not designed for autonomous vehicles. Reducing make-ready times, data management. So all in effort to know what we're all here for, making money, right? So collecting that data in order to intelligently know if you're making money. And I guess also how to automate across multiple equipment platforms, right? How to get all of these different vendors to talk to each other. So,
thank you. Anybody? Oh, thank you, Rob.
It's expensive. So, and then, how to evaluate the payback. Sometimes the technology is not available for what we're seeking to do. And we're talking about specifically paper handling. Technology's not capable to manage some paper handling issues. And the logistics of challenging, the logistic challenges of combining work off multiple machines to one. And one specific challenge was moving books from case making to casing in. Is there a solution for that in the room here, possibly?
We have to wait for the next 20 minutes to figure that out. All right. Who else wants to? Oh.
Well, some of the things are the same. We talked about capital. One of the other ones was really the fear that it will work. I mean, you're putting a lot of faith in the idea that you have an idea, you've got it engineered, and now is it really going to do what you think it's going to do? Having the tech knowledge to try to implement it. How does it fit within your current base of equipment? How are you going to get it in there? And then the other thing is a possible threat to the culture. I mean, if you're bringing in automation, potentially displacing somebody's work, somebody's job, how's that going to be handled within your plant?
Okay. This side of the room? All right. Mark?
I think the only small addition is understanding the manual component of the collection of the data. There's the machines themselves where they have different data collection capabilities, so bringing those different capabilities into a single view is difficult, and then having the manual element of the people with different capabilities and different diligences with tracking the data, and then that turning into being difficult to understand the costs of products. And then we also had to mention of the preventive understanding, well, insight into prevention.
Okay.
Okay, so my perspective in all of this is maybe for smaller presses, maybe some printers who are just getting started or who just are smaller for whatever reason. I was trying to describe how strange really it is when a new press arrives on the floor of a shop like the IPG shop. It's a lot like a UFO landing from outer space. The extent that, we have these dusty old warehouses stuffed to the gills full of books and paper and, old forklifts and rusty chain link fences. It's a manufacturing environment. It's a warehousing environment. And this press lands on the floor and it's like smooth, and beveled edges and perfect paint job. And the Canon one has like a a black like sun visor on the iX to make it look cool, and you can look. But anyway, these machines come in, and they're brilliant, and they embrace a lot of automation, and some of them come connected to other machines which also embrace automation, and it's a delight, but it's also a complete contrast to then the rest of the business. This printer is surrounded by an ancient old warehouse, and I guess also what I was getting at is many of us are getting a beautiful new press, but it's coming in on top of old systems, legacy staff. You know, companies have histories going back forever, basically. And I was just trying to get at trying to deal with that. You know, to some extent, these presses come in and they kind of come into a vacuum. How do you really knit the press together to the outside world in a way that makes it really function the way it should? How do I make that UFO look more like everything else that's going around the shop?
Very well said. All right, coming back over.
So I took notes for this group. Hopefully they won't pummel me after this is over. But quantity, book of 1, book of 1,000. Short run schedules are a problem. Quantifying the benefit, distribution, pick and pack, being able to set aside resources to make the investment. Everybody has a daytime job. They're going to have to make time to do this. Somebody has to have a vision. Not many equipment providers specific to book. Does it seem to be a standard because of product mix coming out of each facility? Limitations on capital investment. Every book is made different.
Okay. Anything else that hasn't been mentioned that folks want to add to the permanent record? No? Okay. Well, now you get to pick one or two or whatever you feel, or it doesn't have to be one that you heard from your table. It could be one you heard from somebody else's table. But what can be done about addressing some of those challenges? I know some of them, your footprint is your footprint, right? I can buy a bigger space, but that's not always available for folks, right? So try to pick something that you think you could actually tackle and solve out of that list that we just heard, and we'll give you another 20 minutes, all right? Go. All right, folks, so who solved all the problems that there are, and you're ready to share with everybody in the room the magic bullet that your table came up with? Who's got a solution they want to share with the group before I start tapping shoulders? Anyone? Bueller? That's a very sad state of affairs if no one wants to share what they talked about over the last 20 minutes. Okay, I figured I could count on that table. That you can get Andy, Joe, or Clark to pretty much talk about anything whenever you need to. I know because I tap you guys to talk all the time.
So when I spoke last time, it was about the UFO and how the UFO. Does this thing work? No, I It works. Yeah. I don't want to wreck it with mucus, you know, I don't. So I used this the UFO metaphor when I was speaking last time, the idea that many of us have little tiny or even giant old warehouses and the new printer shows up and it's like an inscrutable alien object, which is incongruent with the rest of what's going on sometimes, the legacy systems. But I do think that the antidote to that problem, how to manage a new thing in a sea of legacy, is actually back at the printer again, because, of course, the printer itself is the product of hundreds or thousands or hundreds of thousands of hours of testing and feedback from the whole industry, right? A printer in itself is a best practices device, and it suggests that the large printers can deliver amazingly robust new things based on what's best. And also maybe that there are other pieces outside the printer where they can do the same. Andy was mentioning over here, Clark, for most customers, 80% of what they need has already been written, whether or not that's a software thing or a piece of hardware, a piece of automation. We're not all actually just a lily pad. That's my other metaphor. It's not just a single lily pad in an ocean of obsolescence. There's a lot that's already been done, that's been done in the industry that can be harnessed and brought to bear on people's print operations who are looking to grow and to deal with legacy. And so I do think that's true. My little point here also was just that I think that some of these software and workflow pieces that have already been developed, I think they're very valuable, but I also think that many of us aren't aware of what they are. My dream would be some way of having a reference to what those things are, pre-media, pre-flight, website stuff, costing. We all know they're out there, even ERP systems. I think that we all just aren't sure how to connect them together. So I'm going to stop talking.
Thank you, Clark. Yep. Dirk.
So we right up to the mouth. Okay, right up. Can you hear me? All right, good. So we talked and we actually shared some automation ideas that each of the folks here had been involved in. And what we talked about was the need for leadership to create an environment that allows folks to be creative and solve those problems. We talked about, creating a learning environment. How many of us, take the time to go see other printers? How many of us take time to go wander around the Automate show? We were talking, Christian said, hey, they've been doing that. So we've got to create that learning environment where people want to go outside of their comfort zone and learn different ways to handle things. We talked about partnering with our vendors and our suppliers. If you've got a problem and you want to automate something, do you call a vendor in and say, hey, give me your list of things? No, none of those things work. Or do you sit down at the table and say, okay, here's our problem. Let's talk about how we can solve this problem and think through it. We talked about, the need to be open to change, right? Part of the reason that automation fails is because, one, we're insular, right? We want to just do it ourselves. We don't get outside of our comfort zones and outside the box. But the second thing is sometimes as employees, as leaders, we're not willing to change. We want to do it the same way it's always been done. And so do we create an environment as leaders that allows people to drive change? Anything else I forgot? There you go.
Well said. Well said. All right. Who else? Oh, yeah, Dave.
We had a novel idea. So the state governments and federal governments gives out incentives for solar and electric vehicles. We need incentives for automation. Because if we're going to invest in our companies, in our technology, we might need help in making that leap. And if we want to onshore more of this manufacturing, maybe the state or the federal government can help us out.
Okay. Anybody else? Oh, yep. Coming back the other side.
So a couple of ideas with regards to data collection. Tulip, I guess, is a device or a software that can help with data collection that has an IoT interface. So maybe that data from a Tulip device or EFI auto count can be fed back into the system and facilitate some of the, at least, data collection side. Some of the data collection consolidation decision side might be done by something like Ironside, which can take the data in and then also make decisions about what to do with that data, not just collect it. We also spoke about trying to get some of this stuff done on legacy machines with third parties. So possibly small VARs or back to Ironside where they can actually manage the whole project of the data collection and the integration. And then for having parts quickly, Ravinder's brought in a couple 3D printing machines that can make parts for replacement instead of waiting for a shipment from Germany. And then something that we didn't discuss, but I want to add, is Jeremy was talking about some of the HR personnel discipline things, problems. And one idea would be to try to raise the bar and engage those, like a bit of a paradigm flip maybe, engage those people in the solution, which might also help address some of the workforce issues that were talked about earlier today. Paradigm shift, instead of that person being part of the problem, make them part of the solution by bringing them into a higher level of conversation about what's going on in the company, what your problems are, and have them feel and engage in some creative work to get them to help solve the problem, which would also potentially increase something like ownership of it. And then at a graduation I was at, this was years ago, but the ex-CEO of HP spoke, and he told the story about the development of the inkjet printer. And one takeaway that I've kept in mind and use often is the idea of 10x. And instead of looking at trying to refine something to a level of 20% or 30%, if you force a 10x question, so 10x better, 10x faster, 10x cheaper, whatever, you get a paradigm flip in your own mind that can sometimes help come up with creative stuff.
Great, love it. Anybody else? Yeah.
We started with getting over this notion that we're replacing people. We're not replacing people, we're replacing vacancies, or we're replacing dirty, dull, and dangerous jobs. And so that paradigm shift of this is not a headcount thing. We're also all manufacturers, and so we're not printers. We're not solely printers, we're manufacturers, and we're manufacturers that lean into lean automation. And so looking for where smart automation can be applied. And I think a lot of times we get distracted by the technology, the shiny new thing, and rather than being distracted by the technology, thinking about what are the problems we're trying to solve and go to the lowest hanging fruit on that spectrum. Anything I missed, guys? I think that's it. That's good.
Awesome. Anybody else? Last call. All right. Well, we're going to end on something we started last year. We hadn't been in person for a year and a half. So we were trying to think of what can we do to kind of welcome everybody back to a meeting and feel better about things. And so we came up with the idea of a champagne toast. So for those of you that were in Atlanta, remember we had a nice glass of champagne, raised a toast to celebrate being back in person and being back together as BMI members. Now, we're in Louisville, so champagne didn't make a lot of sense, but old fashions did. So, to close off today, we are going to have our old-fashioned toast. And so right now, folks, if you want, we've got one cart there. Is there another one somewhere, Laura? Is that all of them? That's all. Perfect. So it's all on one cart. So if folks want to come and grab your drink, and I'm going to invite Rob from LBS on stage because they were kind enough to sponsor this toast. And I'm going to let Rob say a few words.